reaction to it was almost disbelief. I think I have to put it like that. Even though we'd had this wonderful evidence over the years, primarily evidence that Gwen had taken.
This was evidence leading up to
this, but I mean it was in-depth evidence. But even so, I must be honest and say that the hard work, the grafting, was done by Gwen. And I took the phone call late at night.
This was a phone call
from the Midlands.
From the Midlands, that this was the communication from Russell in spirit.
In spirit. That
gave your telephone number, which started this.
They gave the telephone number through a series of knocks on the table. Oh, right. That's how hard and how difficult it was to start with. It wasn't a sort of straightforward thing, here's a number from Rayleigh, ring it. It was a case of questions and answers on the table. And the young man who rang me was a journalist, a very well-known journalist, and he said that, I have a message for you from your son. And I said, well, how did you get a message from my son? And he told me that it had been spelt out by a series of knocks on the table. And he said, I have a message for his mum. Would I give it? Well, the conversation started almost disbelievingly, and it went on for probably half an hour, just flowing with the information, and we were invited up to the circle.
Extraordinary, extraordinary thing. You must have felt really weird.
Well, it's more than extraordinary, because you read about things like that. It's like most things, you say, you can read about it, but it never happens to you. And when it does happen, it's disbelief. I mean, it has to be, because if you think to yourself, it's as easy as that. But after a while, you think, well, I wonder.
There were, we were talking earlier, and we won't mention names at this stage, but at later, let's call them later experiments or later sittings, you actually did have people with a scientific background and bias and position that attended these sittings.
Yes.
That's right, isn't it? And yet they seem to be very reluctant to come forward and actually state that they witnessed these things, as you're telling me and as Gwen has told me, and many other people are quite prepared openly to talk about. It seems that it's a no-go area as far as the scientist is concerned at the moment. How do you feel about that?
Well, I'm not surprised. I mean, science has to have proof. It was ever thus. I mean, there has to be a formulae for most things. They have to be able to say A plus B equals whatever. And it's understandable. I don't expect... It'll be a while before somebody will stand on a platform. Or I don't suppose anybody would ever do it without proof. But I mean, I looked at it in the old days and I thought, will these people say what we have seen? We could say it because it was part of us. We'd seen something that was unbelievable, if you like. I couldn't expect that any one of these people would stand on a platform and
publicly
say
it, yes,
that we've seen something today that we don't understand, but we know we've seen it. They're scientists.
The great scientists of the past, like Sir William Crookes and Louis Baird was another one.
Yes.
Sir Oliver Lodge.
Yes.
These people did it, didn't they, to their utter detriment.
Well, they did it, and they suffered.
They were great scientists.
Exactly.
With marvellous inventions, and they were destroyed for daring to say that this phenomena was right and that it did exist.
Well, I don't think they were destroyed so much because they were big men, they were very powerful men, but what they did, they left a legacy that people are now picking up on.
Right.
They were brave people, they took a lot of courage. But I wouldn't go so far as to say where they were destroyed. They left an awful lot behind them.
Yes.
They were able to publish it because they believed it.
They were socially humiliated.
They probably were outcasts.
Derided, yes.
By their own types, yes.
Despite the fact that they were actually responsible for some of the greatest inventions of our time.
Yes. Yes. And I think it's ever thus. I mean, it'll happen again, I'm sure.
Yes. So, what is your feeling about that, Alf? I mean, do you think that the scientific evidence, for instance, which I've got contained within this video, based on the work of Ron Pearson, how long do you think it's going to be before the new idea, if you like, is introduced that we all survive death?
It depends on how much effort people are prepared to put into it. I mean, we're told that behind the scenes there are all sorts of things going on. It's like most things. If you throw a small amount of effort at something, it'll take a long time. But if the powers that be are prepared to concentrate, that's all it needs. An effort, a concentrated effort, by those people who can, if you like, do it. Yeah. They've got the wherewithal to do it, they've got the ability, they've got the thought patterns to be able to decide if it is or if it isn't. Yeah. And there's enough evidence, there's enough information. Yes. Then yet, time, it can be done.
Yes. And a question which I've asked before on many occasions, and like your response to it, how do you feel that's going to affect people in general? The knowledge that we all survive death.
Well, it's going to turn an awful lot of things upside down. I think an awful lot of the Orthodox religion believes that there's another world anyway. The only thing that it doesn't have is proof. It doesn't set out to prove it. The peace of mind it's going to give to an awful lot of people will be colossal, providing it's not like we've always said, Gwen and I, when we've talked about it, if you get blasé about something, then it becomes nothing. You've got to see not so much that it tells you there's a life hereafter, but what are we going to do with that knowledge? Are we then going to be able to link in and use the knowledge that they've got to better our lives here? It's not just a case of knowing. You've got to be able to use that information to some end. That's where the pluses will come.
Right. Alf Byrne, thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.
Well, we have waves that we can see, but in the air above the sea, there are other waves that we can't see. And perhaps one of the problems when we're dealing with the subject of life after death is that we're dealing with wavelengths which are beyond our normal senses. Ron Pearson talks of quantum theory, of wave-particle motions, the invisible world. But our whole world is built upon invisible structures. We can't see them, but all science accepts that they exist. We live by virtue of invisible structures. So why do we find it so difficult to comprehend that we leave this dimension vibrating at a certain level and we pass into another dimension in a spirit body or a form which is vibrating at a different level, which is invisible? I spoke to a man who's made a lot of waves himself during the last few years, David Icke.
Well, first of all, I feel there has been a concerted effort to suppress the kind of explanations we're talking about on this video. Throughout our lives, including my own in my generation, and still today, we are offered basically these two choices between one life and then God judges you whether we go to heaven or hell forever, or we're basically a cosmic accident of evolution with no past, no future, of no real worth, and life's a bitch and then you die. And those two kind of forms of seeing the world are ways of helping to control people. If you can persuade someone that they'll be judged on one life, and actually we know on the criteria on which you're going to be judged, so you listen to us and do as we tell you and you'll be fine, or that this spirit-breaking cosmic accident, what's the point? They're very great ways of control. And I feel that when you look just outside of the public arena, you find open-minded scientists and you find open-minded people who are seeing that these two explanations are not the only two that